The evening began wrapped in easy laughter, soft music floating through the rooms, and the rich, lingering aroma of fine wine that seemed to warm every corner. Daniel and I had invited a handful of close friends along with a few of my colleagues for what was meant to be a relaxed dinner party. The atmosphere felt effortless at first, the food tasted wonderful, the glasses kept refilling, and the conversation flowed with that familiar blend of gentle teasing, half-serious remarks, and comfortable exaggeration that always seems to surface around a well-set table. I had drunk just enough wine to loosen my tongue and inflate my confidence, perhaps more than enough. When one of the guests casually asked how long Daniel and I had been married, I flashed a wide grin, rolled my eyes dramatically, and announced, 77 years. So I suppose it's about time for an upgrade. Maybe a newer model husband. The table exploded with laughter. Everyone joined in, gasps, playful nudges, quick-witted comebacks, everyone except Daniel. At first I didn't register his quiet. I was too intoxicated by the spotlight, by the delighted reactions rippling around me. "Careful, Daniel," one friend teased. "You might actually get traded in." Still riding the wave, I smirked and tossed out, "Well, maybe I'll find one who actually listens." Another burst of laughter rolled through the room, but when I glanced at Daniel, his smile had vanished. He was staring down at his plate, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed and impossible to read. I dismissed it instantly. He was overreacting, taking it too seriously. It was only a joke. Couples poke fun at each other constantly. Nothing serious. I waved the moment away in my mind, convinced he would let it go by morning. I was completely mistaken. The dinner carried on, but something subtle had changed. The chuckles grew thinner, more strained. Whenever I attempted another light-hearted jab, Daniel met my eyes with the same unnerving composure, quiet, watchful, undisturbed on the surface yet somehow heavier than before. By the time dessert arrived, one of my coworkers, sensing the awkward undercurrent, tried to lighten things again. "So, Daniel," he said with a nervous chuckle, "you really going to let her trade you in like that?" A few uneasy laughs followed. Daniel set his fork down with deliberate slowness, lifted his gaze, and offered a smile that held no trace of warmth. "No," he answered softly. "I don't think she'll have to." The entire room froze. A cold prickle of discomfort stirred in my stomach. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, forcing a playful edge into my voice to mask the sudden tightness in my chest. He eased back in his chair, posture relaxed, tone level and chillingly even. "I mean, if she wants a new husband, she won't need to search very hard. She's already been spending quite a lot of time with Mark from accounting." The laughter vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. My heart lurched and then seemed to stop altogether. I stared at him, eyes wide, blood pounding in my ears. "Daniel," I began, but he continued without pause, his voice still calm, almost conversational. "Yeah. I've seen the texts. The late-night messages. The meetings that never quite make it onto your calendar. So maybe the real joke here is me believing I still had a wife." Silence swallowed the room whole. My colleagues traded furtive, uncomfortable glances. Someone carefully placed a wine glass on the table as though afraid to make any sound at all. A flush of heat surged across my face, panic coiling like a vice around my ribs. "Daniel, please," I whispered, barely audible. But he only held my gaze, that devastating mixture of betrayal, sorrow, and restrained anger concealed behind perfect self-control. "You wanted to make a joke," he said evenly. "I just decided to finish it for you." The words sliced through the air, cold and precise. Nobody dared breathe. The only noise left was the relentless, indifferent ticking of the wall clock. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain, but my voice cracked on the first syllable. "It wasn't like that," I managed. He gave the faintest, most bitter smile I had ever seen on his face. "You're right," he replied quietly. "It's never like that. Until it is." My hands started trembling uncontrollably. My coworkers stared at the tablecloth, the ceiling, anywhere but at me. I wanted to disappear, to claw back the last quarter hour, to wipe away the arrogant smirk I had worn so carelessly. The humiliation wasn't merely public, it was surgical. He had selected each phrase like a scalpel, and every one struck the most vulnerable place. After an eternity of suffocating quiet, Daniel rose from his chair. He smoothed the front of his jacket, folded his napkin with meticulous care, placed it on the table, and looked at me one last time. "You always wanted the last word, Emma," he said, voice low and perfectly steady. "Now you have it." Then he turned and walked out the front door, leaving a room full of stunned people who couldn't find a single word to say. I remained seated, paralyzed, heart hammering, mouth dry, the echo of my own earlier laughter ringing in my skull like something vicious and mocking. No one spoke for what felt like an endless stretch of time. At last, one friend leaned forward and whispered, "Emma, was he serious?" I had no answer. I couldn't form one. Shame pressed down on me until breathing felt difficult. The flippant words I had flung so lightly had returned as a mirror, forcing me to see exactly what I had turned into: thoughtless, cruel, emotionally distant from the man who had once looked at me with nothing but devotion. In that crushing stillness, surrounded by people who suddenly felt like strangers, the realization hit fully: I hadn't merely lost his respect. I had lost him entirely. When I finally returned home later that night, the house felt cavernous and lifeless. His half of the closet hung empty. A small note rested on the kitchen counter. Only 3 words: "Enjoy the upgrade." That was the moment everything inside me shattered. I sank to the floor, trembling, the full weight of my actions collapsing over me like an avalanche. My habit of sharp, cutting jokes had always been armor, my way of staying in control, of keeping vulnerability at arm's length. But now, stripped bare, I understood they had only concealed my insecurity, my entitlement, my slow neglect of the person who mattered most. Months have passed since that night. Occasionally I catch sight of him from afar, moving through his days with a lightness, a freedom, as though the hurt I inflicted has finally loosened its grip. Whenever anyone shrugs and says, "It was just a joke," a bitter smile crosses my face. Because I know the truth now. Some jokes are not humor at all. They are quiet confessions slipping out when we think no one is listening closely enough. And once they leave our lips, they can never be unsaid. The night I decided to be clever and funny at his expense, I didn't simply lose the room's laughter. I lost the one person who had loved me without reservation. And the silence he left in his wake has proven far louder, far more final, than any punchline I could ever deliver.